Welcome to I Have Some Questions. The show is all about asking questions our guests have never asked themselves before, never thought about, or been too afraid to explore. It's designed to uncover the human story at the root of successes and failures and help us as an audience learn and grow from that story. My hope is that you'll hear brilliant guests exploring new ideas and challenging themselves in new ways of thinking. I think this makes for great conversations. I'm going to bring on entrepreneurs, authors, coaches, scientists, and frankly, any vein of super interesting, successful, and passionate human I can find. I am fascinated by passionate people, and I have some questions for them. I'm Erik Berglund, and I hope you'll join me every week for new episodes. Welcome back to I Have Some Questions. I'm your host, Erik Berglund, and today my guest is Kim Willis. Kim started his career in sales at 18 years old as a shy 18-year-old knocking on doors in Sydney, Australia, trying to sell books because his mom said it might be good for him. Kim went on to produce millions of dollars of sales in the life insurance industry and then millions of dollars worth of products in the early online days, back as early as 2006. And what he did is he developed a mastery of the skill of storytelling. And I'm really excited to interview Kim because his success as a sales professional and his perspective on how you tell stories to help other people buy as his mechanism for selling is something I'm really interested in going deep in. Kim and his son run Persuasion Pursuit, which is a client acquisition strategy business for experts in skill-based businesses. I'm really excited to go deep with Kim here. Please give it up for Kim Willis. Well, Kim, one of the things that excited me when I saw your interview form was your background going door to door at age 18. And as you've described it, telling stories for profit. And, you know, I had a similar experience. I won't jump the shark and tell you my version of it yet, but I come from a pretty similar background. How did that experience at 18 years old really shape you as you look back at it?
Yeah, thanks, Erik. In many ways, I think it changed my life because I was terribly shy at age 18. And the only reason why I accepted the offer for this job was because my mum was pushing me. She said, "This is a very unusual mum, but in many ways, but this was wisdom personified because she was saying, you know, I work in an office and there are salespeople in there and they seem to make more money than secretaries like me. So maybe this could be good from, like a personal development point of view, even if you hate it for, the first month or 2 months or whatever, maybe it'd be good for you." So that's how I started. I had an offer and it was linked to my local church actually. And they had an outreach program where they were selling health books called The Modern Ways to Health. It's a 2-volume set, and so they put me through a kind of a formal training school in the office there, for about 4 or 5 days, and then the following Monday I was to go out and literally knock on doors. Right,
Yeah.
never done anything like that in my life. Never done anything. I never even raised money for the local school by knocking on doors. I didn't do any of it. So it was it was definitely terrifying for me. But anyway, I kept thinking what my mum said, so I started knocking on doors on the Monday morning, and it was interesting to say the least. But look, I did get a few nice people let me into their houses, and I did the presentation the way I was taught the previous week, and they say thanks very much, but we'll think about it. And that was it. So okay, right, that's the end of that one. And so I just kept moving on and knocked on a few more doors, whatever it was. 20 minutes, a long time ago, so I don't exactly remember the explicit details, but I did a few presentations that day, but zero sales, and that's basically how it transpired for the rest of the week. Problem was that on the Friday, I had to call Pastor Stan, because he was my trainer, my coach, if you like. I had to call him and report the bad news. So anyway, I did, and I said, look, I feel like quitting. I don't think I'm cut out for this, blah, blah. And he said, well, look, before you quit, I just remember what you told me about your mum and doing it for personal development. Why don't you give it another go, another try next week, one more week? But this time I'll come out with you on Monday and, I'll see what you're doing and I'll give you some good suggestions and help you fine tune things. So on one hand, I thought, oh, this would be an awesome opportunity because this guy, Stan Rex, he was the number one seller of these books. So this is in Sydney, Australia, right? So he was the number one seller of these books globally. And, the church was an American church. And so everything came from the US. And he beat the Americans at their own game. He was incredible. So I was honored in a way to have him, critique what I'm doing. But on the other hand, he was the number one in the world. I was terrified. And but anyway, I agreed and then went out on the Monday. Same thing, knock on doors, get into the houses and nothing. No sales. And then we did another one, no sales. And he said, look, is this more or less how you do it, how you've been doing it? And I said, yeah, that's more or less it. I try to be as accurate as I can so that you can give me, good advice. And he said, okay, well, let's stop the door knocking. We'll go to McDonald's. Yeah, they have McDonald's in Australia, even back then. And we'll go to McDonald's and we'll do a bit of a debrief and I'll give you some ideas because I think I know what's going on here. That was the pivotal point. It wasn't the knocking on the doors. It was the mentoring from Stan, the coaching from Stan. So we sat down. We were vegetarians at that point. Now I'm not. I'm a carnivore, but at that point, so we sat down and had a veggie burger and a glass of orange juice. And he said, okay, well, he threw it to me and he said, look, before I give you my 2 cents worth, tell me, is there anything that you noticed from your performance, the two interviews that I saw, the two presentations, anything you noticed? And I said, well, if I was to be really brutally honest with you and myself, I'd say I didn't ask many questions. He said, yeah. Why do you say that? And I said, I was scared. I was terrified of rejection. I was terrified of the silence. In that type of environment, sometimes there is silence. They don't want to answer the question. So I just didn't ask them. I didn't ask them with one or two exceptions. He said, yeah, that makes sense. And he said, was there anything else? And I said, yeah, well, I told one or two stories, but I wasn't very good at it. I know I didn't duplicate what I was taught in the school in the formal school last week. And he said, that's amazing. And he said, I've taken some notes and here are my notes. And he just turned it around, the piece of paper. And number one, no stories. And number two, not asking questions. I said, wow, that's incredible. He said, congratulations. Yeah. You're very self-perceptive. At least you realized what you were doing wrong. And so he gave me a bit of training just around the table there at McDonald's. And he said, look, here's what I'd like you to do. Go home, practice in front of the mirror, do whatever you have to do, just get it right, and go out tomorrow morning on Tuesday by yourself and see what happens. So I did that on the Tuesday morning. Unfortunately, I'd love to share a good news story, but I still bombed on Tuesday. But I felt there was a change within. There was a change. I was starting to change. I felt more confident. I was definitely asking more questions and listening to the answers, more importantly. And I was definitely, I was telling more stories and I was telling them with conviction. And this time they were relevant stories for the prospect's situation, which is critically important. And so although I didn't make any sales on that day, I felt confident, went out on Tuesday, same result, but on Wednesday I got my first sale, and then a day or two later I got another sale. So when I called in on Friday to report my results, I had some good news for him, and that was basically it. That's a story about storytelling.
What an experience to go through at 18 years old. And there's multiple layers to that, right? One, there's overcoming a fear and something that you weren't naturally good at, right? There's a mountain you climbed that you really had never climbed before at a pretty young age that a lot of people never really climb, getting good at outbound sales. So that's part of the story. There's the value of the feedback you got. Ask more questions, tell more tales, right? Which is a pretty valuable set of skills to learn at any age. but like you got that feedback from a master of the craft at a young age. And at a meta level, you got to observe really powerful coaching at a young age. He had to set the bar for you for what it was like to get really good, potent feedback. So you learned right then and there, like how to qualify the value of feedback you're getting from somebody. He used very few words, probably, it sounds like, to make really potent points to have an impact on your life. You got to live through all of that at 18, 19 years old. How did that structure, those 3 or maybe more observations, how did that really shape what you did with the rest of your life afterwards?
Oh, I couldn't calculate in numerical terms how much extra like income revenue that it produced. Right. Millions and millions of dollars over a long period of time, but countless tens of millions of dollars. But so that was definitely one metric that was kind of impressive. But I think it helped to shape me as a leader, because I didn't stay in that book selling door-to-door thing for very long. I just wanted to prove a point, and I wanted to justify the belief that Pastor Stan had in me, but also what my mother, had in me as well.
Yeah.
So I ended up going into the life insurance industry, right? So it's like going from the frying pan into the fire in a way. But it seemed more of an interesting industry for me, more intellectually challenging, and so I started in that industry, but I got off to a very fast start. Unlike the book selling, I got off to a fast start because I was already kind of bulletproof in a way, and that I had this, I knew how to ask questions, I knew how to probe, I knew how to display empathy and really care for people, which is the essence of what I try and do. But the storytelling, once again, played a role. And then that eventually I started to get noticed within the industry, and ended up forming a sales team. I was invited to form a sales team by the management, and I did that. And that's where more leadership skills were required, gradually acquired them over time. And, for decades, I sort of ran different sales teams selling different products, but originally it was the life insurance, it was financial services, and then ultimately I went out on my own and created my own product and marketed it, and then also recruited a sales team. So leadership is definitely part of it. It's a huge part of really success. And even I always think that even if you don't officially have a leadership title such as a manager or a CEO or whatever. Even at the workplace, just as a rank and file employee, you can display and demonstrate leadership early on, and people will notice you.
Dude, I hear your point on the leadership side, and that's obviously where I've taken my career. But look, I came from the same background, man. Like I cut my teeth walking door to door, selling free estimates for paint jobs, and then actually running a house painting company when I was in college, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And then I ran a franchise. I led painting crews. I had to develop other people to go and do that. And I became an internal developer who would train franchise salespeople to go out and sell and to just get people to give you their info so you could give them a free estimate and then be effective at the free estimate so you could actually close a paint job. And then I too transitioned that over into the insurance industry. And so we have a pretty similar background there at a formative time in our lives. I didn't realize that when we were coming into this, but let's focus on the sales side, because I think it is very rare for my audience to hear from somebody who's genuinely an excellent sales expert and who trains other sales experts. And I think you might be able to tell some stories that'd be really interesting and beneficial about what it really means to be a top-end sales talent, because I think that's commonly misunderstood by the vast majority of people, even salespeople. And I suspect we think similarly about it just because of the formative nature of what you just described to me and the time you went through it and how you learned to sell, right? I don't really know you from Adam, but I suspect that shared experience at a young age taught us some similar things. And I want to see if I can tease that out of you and see if I'm correct or not. So talk to me a little bit, if you would, about why do you think, I have this belief that top-end sales talent is incredibly rare. And I don't mean that there's not any good salespeople out there. I am not here talking shit about the sales industry at all. I'm just aware. I led salespeople. I hired them. I fired them. I trained them. I built them. I'm not claiming to be at the top tier of it, but I think I'm a pretty darn good salesperson, and the numbers have proved it. But there seems to be this gap between mediocre, average salespeople who do pretty well, by the way, and make a good amount of money. They provide a lot of value. They do wonderful things. But there's a pretty good-sized gap between your average salesperson and your really top-end salesperson, right? It's almost the difference between college sports and pro sports. It's almost the difference between high school athletics and the Olympics. Like there's just a massive gap there. Why do you think that is?
Oh wow, it's a tough question. I'll probably have to reflect back about think about some of the people that I've worked with, either they were team members that I was managing, or just people that I've learned from in different sales environments. But I think they've got to have the fire in the belly. I think that's essential. Some people just don't have it, and I know I've heard some people say, "Oh, you can teach anyone to sell." Maybe, but doesn't necessarily translate to tier one performance.
Yeah.
They've got to have something extra, and fire in the belly. I'm not sure what other phrase you could use, but I think most people will know what we're talking about here. Talk about the big why. They've got to be driven individuals.
Sure.
They just think that they've got something better to offer than they've got a fair amount of self-belief, so they believe that they've got something better to offer, and people need to talk to them. They have that inner conviction. So it's very it's difficult. I guess there are different qualities associated with top performers, but a lot of it starts with the fire in the belly and flows from there. We hear the term killer instinct. Now that can be misconstrued, and I don't want to suggest that I don't want to sort of portray it as being something that is like antisocial or destructive or whatever.
Right.
And I'm much more of a consultative type of guy. That's my selling methodology. Yes, I do ask a lot of questions. I listen closely to the answers and all of that, and then I illustrate core points or key points with relevant stories. I find that if I do all of that part, I want to find out what the pain points are, et cetera, et cetera. And if I do all of that well, closing, people talk about closing. Half the time people close themselves. They're just leaning forward, and I'm just resonating so well with them that you don't need to do too much of the hard closing. But at the end of the day, you've still got to have a little bit of hustle in you. Even if you're a consultative type of a person, you've got to have a little bit of hustle in you. Now, I can think of people. In fact, I wrote a post about him, published it last night, and I'm not going to mention his name because it'd be too cruel. But he's a guy that I worked with in the UK, and really nice guy. Very nice guy, lovely guy. And I've worked with plenty of nice guys. But some nice guys still have a bit of that killer instinct. Others don't. This one, no killer instinct. He could have the best talking to the best prospect in the world, the best potential client in the world, but can he close a deal? No way. So a bit of fire in the belly, killer instinct. Yeah, they're the sort of attributes that I look for.
Those are helpful for sure. And it can probably be helpful for, again, thinking of the portion of the audience that's listening that isn't surrounded or hasn't regularly experienced the humanity of really top-end salespeople. It can feel like, because of culture, that a high, powerful closing sales talent is somebody pushy, or that they're a verbal ninja, or that they're Harvey Specter, or, they've got some TV quality magic voodoo wordsmithing that they do. And it's not to say that that's not helpful, but that is not what makes top-end sales talent top-end. Now, fire in the belly helps. Hunger helps. Killer instinct and being able to see where there's opportunity helps. I think the very best sales talent in the world is obsessed with technique and with process and with curiosity. Because the very best salespeople in the world ask way more questions than the average salesperson does. And they're not stupid questions. They're not leading questions. They are genuinely interested in the answer of how what they're saying helps you, hurts you. What happens if you get this? What happens if you don't? What happens if you act now? What happens if you wait 6 years from now? And that's not a pushy tactic for them. That's genuine curiosity as a human trying to serve you. Curiosity is a common tactic or common trait. Process orientation is the one that you and I learned at a young age, right? Like, you only have to knock on so many doors before you start to realize, like, oh, there's only like 6 things people are going to say to me here. Maybe I could be prepared for all 6 of those, and it might be better for me. And that process leads to the technique, man. Like, you just become obsessed with, like, how do I position this thing? And how do I ask that question? And when is the right time to show this visual? And when is the right time to ask a question instead? And what are the buying signals here? And like, you just end up baking out this well understood process of the buyer's journey that you match your selling process to. And those 3 in combination, curiosity, process, and technique, especially in the hands of somebody who has fire in the belly and who's hungry, man, that's what leads, I think, to that differentiation between your average seller, who still does very well, by the way, for a lot of companies, and that real top tier talent that it sounds like we've both been exposed to, maybe.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned included the word curiosity, because I should have mentioned it when I was talking. But it's that's definitely a factor. I'm not just thinking of myself or you, but I think of a guy who commented on one of my LinkedIn posts last night. He's been a supporter of mine for many, many years, and I've noticed with him that he's also a top sales performer for sure. But curiosity, very curious guy. When I've done calls with him, very curious, and exactly the same as me, and by the sounds of it, the same as you. Curiosity is a big one. People underestimate it. It's funny how a lot of people that I know, whether they're in sales or not, they're not naturally curious. They don't have this inquiring mind, and that's a shame, because they miss so many opportunities.
And those three things are trainable. The fire in the belly, I can't really train. I can select for, right? I can work with, I can try to not hire people that lack it, but you can train curiosity. You can train process. You can train that hyper focus on technique that's built in there. The very best salesperson I've ever worked with, I'll call him out by name. I still like the guy a tremendous amount, and maybe you'll listen to this podcast someday. The very best salesperson I've ever worked with is named Mike Finzer. And Mike worked for me at the previous company where I led a sales team. And Mike had that combination of everything I just talked about. Naturally, incredibly hungry. Like, that guy could smell blood in the water, and he wanted to create it, and he had that. But he didn't really want it if he wasn't serving his customers really well. And that led him to being really curious. Not shy, not hesitant, but curious to make sure that the value he was bringing was the very best value he could bring to them. And that meant he overturned rocks that other people would have just skipped by, right? And this guy would pick up $20 bills by skipping over a quarter sale that he might have made. He would land massive deals because he just cared enough to ask more questions and make sure he was really serving them the right way. And along the way, he had learned that maturity of process and just being patient through the process and making sure he checked the boxes to get through it. And he was pretty obsessed with his technique. He really wouldn't let himself deliver in an underprepared way. And like, I learned so much from working with Mike. I'm proud to say I was able to help him too, but like, he was the best combination of that I've ever seen. I suspect there's someone in your mind too who's like the best version of that combo you've seen as well. And it's just fun to work with guys like that, man. It is a pleasure to build teams that are filled with folks like that.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, there's got plenty of people that I can think of going back 20 or 30 years or even more who exemplified those, or, just lived those, what's the word? What's the right word there? Well, exemplified, exemplified those attributes. And it's wonderful. And, as you said, sometimes they learn from you, sometimes you learn from them, and that's the wonderful thing. It's sort of like a collaboration, a very relaxed collaboration. I'm thinking of when I was working in a sales office, and sometimes I'd pair up with different people and we'd share leads, and then we'd do joint calls together and all that kind of stuff. Learning from each other. Fantastic.
So you've led teams across a couple different companies, right? And then gone and sold a tremendous amount yourself. And whether you led the teams or not, you've been exposed to them. What are some of the most challenging sales environments you've seen people be successful in? Like, what are some of the white whales? Maybe not deals or dollar sizes. I don't really care about that. It's more like contextually, what have been the most difficult areas you found to be successful selling, or you found it difficult to develop sales teams into?
Well, I talked about the life insurance industry, which was the first major thing that I did after doing the little door-to-door book selling job. That was difficult because it's an intangible product, just like selling services. They're intangibles, especially high ticket. Yeah, definitely difficult there because you're selling a promise. There's nothing. It's not like selling a motor car or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Intangibles.
yeah, intangibles. It's more difficult. And life insurance, well, it's a topic that people don't really like to talk about, dying and disability and all that kind of stuff. So it's hard. Very few people phone in and say, "Hey, I want some life insurance today." So the need for
Right.
it
Right.
always has to be created. Well, you're in the financial industry for a while there, as you said. The need has to be created because they're not thinking about it. In the main, they're not thinking about it. So yeah, that was a tough one for me to learn. But like I said before, I was fortunate in that I was trained well and I made sales quickly. It wasn't painful at all in the early stages. But then as I moved up, looking for better quality people to work with, to sell to, they were much more discerning, and it was another learning experience required there for me to be effective dealing with those high quality people, And
Yeah.
but once again, selling intangibles, yeah, I think that's a tough one. But if you master it, I often say that that was probably other than the book selling, example, that was having some great mentors in that insurance industry was phenomenal because it meant that when it came to me developing my own services and selling those, in a way, I was kind of bulletproof because I knew
Yeah.
how to sell ideas and concepts, not just tangible products.
Yeah, that idea selling is, I've often called it conversion selling, not like replacement selling. A lot of times in the business world,
Mm.
especially in B2B, you're selling a replacement widget, right? Or good or service or something just to better, faster, cheaper than the alternative service that they're already buying. And that's the vast majority of the selling experience for the world, whether it's a tangible, intangible, B2B, B2C, is that. But that idea selling, that conversion, that higher level thinking, that I have to go not only get your attention, but get your attention and cause you to think of a solution you may have never even heard before, is a whole different level of sales requirement. So when we'd interview salespeople, I often really valued people who came from successful careers in the intangible world, insurance, financial investment products, just because, like, man, those people aren't calling in to buy. They're not inside salespeople. They're every day they've got to go make someone be interested in what they're saying, and that itself is a completely different skill set.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's higher level. There's no question in my mind. It's higher level. It's but very much worth it to learn the skill. Even if you only did it for a few months, you become a better communicator as a result. But yeah, I always like to think of it as creating money out of thin air. There was nothing there to
Yeah,
start with. There
yeah,
wasn't any demand. They weren't asking for it. But for some reason, they gave me time. They booked an appointment with me. I gave them an incentive to, to put some time aside. And then we just start talking, relax, disturb, relieve, close was the four-part method that I was taught, process. And relax, chit-chat, disturb. That's where the questions come in. Need to ask
yeah,
the right questions. Relieve, well, I've got some good news for you today. Let me just share a concept with you. I'm not going to go into the details right now. Just let me share a concept and see if you like the concept. If you like the concept, okay, then we can talk about the details later. And if you get those first three stages right, the close virtually almost takes care
Yeah.
of itself, you know. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing to be able to come up with an idea for somebody, and that it will help them, and you basically share the idea after asking questions, etc. And before you know it, they're saying, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, tell me more. It's wonderful. What have we done? We just created another revenue stream out of thin air."
That's one of the things I think is so fun about being an entrepreneur, man, is it does feel like creating money out of nothing, right?
Yeah,
There's something incredibly rewarding about acknowledging that there's a problem in the world you can solve and figuring out how to deliver it in a way that the value you give is greater than the value that you get, and yet you get a substantial amount of value and revenue from doing so. That's just fun. Like, it's so fulfilling when you
yeah.
do that. It's also such a pain in the ass to go and try and do it all the time, right? Like, it is hard to consistently every day have to go and do that. How do you keep up the drive?
Well, I like to get some small wins every day,
Hmm.
just little wins. I don't, not necessarily even a sale, or big or small sale, but just small wins. And booked another appointment today, or something like that. You know, most of my leads now come from referral partnerships, so I don't need, like, say, LinkedIn. I don't need to be constantly outreaching to people anymore. Um, but yeah, just like I did a call last night with a guy. He's based in Dubai. He's an American guy, but he's from Boston. He's back in Boston at the moment because he had some family matters too. But we did a fantastic call last night, and he started just from where I actually heard him on a podcast. Yeah, I heard him on a podcast. And I thought, I like the sound of this guy. So I
Yeah.
reached out to him on LinkedIn. I didn't pitch him or anything like that. Commented on his posts a little bit, and then sent a connection request, and he accepted it. And now it's a fully fledged referral partnership, and leads are flowing both ways. But yeah, it's and introductions and all of that. It's a beautiful thing when it sort of gets to that point, you know. But I think what was the question? I sort of lost track of the question
No,
there.
it's all right. I was curious how you kept the momentum, right? How you pushed through against
Yeah.
the adversity of it. Like, as rewarding as it is, it's also most days aren't that rewarding, right? Like, the wins happen,
No,
but like not every day.
no, no. Some days are terrible, and but uh, I try and keep my spirits up so that even if I have a setback, for instance, I had a setback last Friday, and the person that I thought was going to do business with me backed out, or at least temporarily backed out. And I thought, oh, damn it, would it be nice to have that for the weekend, you know, something to look forward to
Right.
in the weekend, a little bit of a celebration. And this happens to all of us. Let's face it, it does happen. There's not a lot. Sometimes there's not a lot we can do about it. Could be external circumstances that we can't control. But then my faith in human nature was fortified because yesterday the same person reached out and said, "I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rock and roll." So something happened
Yeah.
over the weekend, something that I couldn't control, other than a little note that I sent this person. I sent her this note late on Friday before I went to bed. I just sent this little note, and maybe there was something in there. Bang, thought about it over the weekend. Monday, sent me the message. Yeah. So sometimes it comes good again, even though you have some bad news. But look, we've got to be resilient. And I think it was Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill said something like, success is really about having the ability to bounce back from adversity and maintain your enthusiasm no matter what.
Mm.
Something like that. I'm just paraphrasing him, but
Yeah.
essentially maintain your enthusiasm. And I think a lot of people in sales or in just in the workplace doing everyday jobs, etc. Maybe they don't move up the ladder there, the ladder of success, because they just can't maintain enthusiasm, and their workmates, the managers and the leaders, they notice it. So
Yeah.
maintaining enthusiasm is not always easy, but that's a big differentiator, I think, between those who are
So what's the
successful and
trick
those who are
for you?
not.
Like when you have that moment where like your enthusiasm is down, right? And maybe it was last week in that example you used, or maybe there's been deeper holes, but like when that moment happens, where you're just not feeling the enthusiasm, like what do you do to channel it? What's your secret or your recipe, your tricks? How have you learned how to manipulate yourself, frankly, into
Yeah,
consistently doing the things you know you need to get to that place of abundance again? How do you do it?
yeah. Manipulation, self manipulation is what it's about, or sometimes I just call it brainwashing, self brainwashing, because the brain, it's if we don't sort of control our thoughts to a certain degree, well, you know, it's a pathway to nowheresville. So I remember a mentor when I was living in London with my wife many years ago. I went and heard a guy called Larry Thompson, and Larry was one of these in your face. He was from Texas, and he'd fly across to London once a month to deliver a big workshop for people like me. And he'd say that he'd talk about adversity. He'd talk about this topic because everyone experiences it. And he'd say, look, when I get a setback, when I get a rejection or something like that, it hurts and it stops me in my tracks. But not for a day, not for a week, not for a month or a lifetime, for a few hours. That's it. I'm back in the game again. How did he do it? Pretty much the same I did it. I used to, when it happens to me, I look back at some of the successes that I've had in the past. I just remind myself that I'm good enough. I'm good enough, and I can, it's just another setback. Just keep pressing forward. Sometimes when I had a very few low points during the COVID, during that process there,
Oh yeah.
I had some shocking experiences that sometimes I reflect upon, but I had some shocking experience, and that really got me. It was a very down period for me. Seeing people die in the streets from alcoholic
Right.
poisoning because of lockdowns, they couldn't go to their normal. Anyway,
Right. Right.
it really hit me bad. But in the end, there, I just had to dig deep, look back at some of the things that I've done in the past that made me feel good, talk to a few people, get my spirits up, and back in the game again.
I love that idea of just don't try and not feel down. If you try to fight feeling down, you're going to fight a losing battle. Just but acknowledging it, letting it happen, but minimizing it, letting it only have a certain amount of your time, a couple hours, maybe today, the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah,
But then, like, okay, you lived through that, move on. That's a good strategy. I
yeah,
often
another
think
one.
through like, go ahead. No,
Sorry.
no, please.
I was just saying another thing that I've done in the past, and I'll still do it if circumstance requires it, is just change the physical environment. So that
Mm,
means getting out of the house, leaving the apartment, going for a walk, smelling the flowers, look at the birds, whatever, just change the physical environment. Even if you only do it for half an hour, it's amazing how it can reframe your thinking so that when you come back, life isn't so bad after all.
right.
Optimism is that Churchill quote. You've got to have the optimism, enthusiasm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Getting a different environment, context changing. I think back to like when I made that transition from running my painting company and training salespeople in that environment into the insurance business. I joined janky, like I joined a really shady insurance firm. I didn't know it. I was too young. I had no idea until
Yeah,
later that like, oh, that was not a good firm to join. But that's what I joined. And so I learned how to just smile and dial in that environment, how to use their script. And it was really effective script. And in order to motivate myself on Monday nights, because we couldn't leave the office until we had 10 booked appointments on Monday nights. And like
cool.
that meant sometimes I was calling people till 9:45 at night, which I did not like, and part of what made this place shady. But that's how I, cut my teeth and learned to be disciplined about it. But I would go to the grocery store before that smile and dial session, and I would buy a bag of peanut M&Ms. Peanut M&Ms are like my favorite little treat.
Mm-hmm.
And I would open the bag in front of myself, and I would pour some out on the table. And I could not have a peanut M&M until I booked an appointment. That was it.
Yeah,
Small win motivation. And then that first M&M I ever got was so satisfying. If it was my first call or my 30th call. And what I learned was you'll always get to the M&Ms if you just do the work. And I learned that in training cold callers too. I used to, pay my college students that I was a student too, but pay my college student painters. They had to go walk around the neighborhood and get one lead per week. every neighborhood they painted in, walk around and here's the script and say this. And I would bet them, I would pay them $20 a lead. Anybody who says yes genuinely and fills out this little flyer and lets me get their information, I'll pay you $20 per lead. Or if you follow this script and if you stand this way in front of somebody's door, if you stand there and block the door, your physical presence shuts people down. So if you do everything the way I teach you, I bet you can't do it 9 times in a row without getting a yes. And if I lose, I'll give you $20 too. Either way, you're going to get $20 if you just go knock on 9 doors for me and use this script. And I very rarely lost the bet. So I just learned like that if you just go back to the process, what's helped you be successful in previous contexts, you'll get there. Like it's not A plus B equals C exactly, but like it does work pretty well. If you just follow this process consistently enough, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, so true. I love your emphasis on the process. And you've got to believe in the process, haven't you? You've got to be totally on board with it.
Yeah, there's some caveats around that word process, right? I get skeptical looks from people when I've done a lot of sales coaching and sales training in my career. That's not what my businesses do, but I've been dragged into it because of my experience. And when I tell people I'm very process oriented, the sales leaders often look at me sideways like, this guy can't be very good at what he does. And it's like, well, yeah, that word process means a lot, right? You have to have a process you believe in. You've got to have one that's proven. You've got to have one that really takes into consideration needs analysis and qualification and really prioritizes understanding why somebody would buy your program or product or whatever it is in the first place. Like, you got to believe the process is the right process. And you have to live in a culture in the company where that process is appreciated and valuable as well. I came from a sales culture of process at my young age. And then I moved into companies where gunslinging sales was what was valued. People who could just word vomit their way to success was valued in organizations I joined. And so my process focus wasn't appreciated in that culture, even though it ended up being very effective. But you got to have the right process and you got to have cultural buy-in on it. That's what really drives success here. Because if you don't have that, you're going to be the weirdo. You're not going to be there for long.
100%. Yeah, you've got to. Critically important, I think.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I could talk sales and interesting things like that all day long because I'm pretty fascinated when I get into a conversation with somebody who's really got the goods and can go produce there. But let's shift gears a little bit into something that's relevant is storytelling. Right? Sales is mostly storytelling. Conducting a narrative by which the person can see themselves going from suffering and struggling to succeeding and winning is what we really do mentally in the sales journey with the customers we engage with. How do you think about that? How do you tell that story? How do you tell the story of storytelling in sales?
Can you just clarify that a little bit? Tell the story of storytelling in sales?
Yeah, like pretend you were giving a lecture to a bunch of novice salespeople who needed to learn about the value of storytelling in sales.
Yeah. Okay.
How would you tell them the story of how important storytelling is in sales?
Yeah. Well, okay. Just thinking about examples of how I've done it in the past. I do it often. I also do it through my content on LinkedIn because I don't just work with salespeople. I work with founders, experts, people like that, and there's more content involved now compared to previously, where it was just belly to belly kind of selling. But it just depends on the situation. But the turning people onto storytelling, it's important, and it's not always easy to do. But if I'm talking to just one-on-one, talking to a small group of people, whether they're in sales or they're experts and they're trying to build their consultancy or whatever it is, I'm always emphasizing the value of storytelling, and often I'll just start with a story about a story, and then I might circle back and say, okay, now you were kind of riveted when I was telling that story, weren't you? And I go, yeah, 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 right onto it. Really love the story. Thanks for sharing, blah, blah, blah. Right. That's the sort of thinking that you need to have with your business, with your sales efforts or whatever. You need to be on board with storytelling 100%. And you've got to figure out ways to tell stories that work well for the person you're telling it to. So there's got to be relevant. It's got to satisfy the relevance test. We do simple story, even simple storytelling. I think often we can sort of incorporate a little bit of the hero story elements. You know, you've got the villain, you've got the hero. So the customer is the hero, supposedly. Could there could be other heroes in the story as well, but you need to have a villain. You need to have an enemy. So sometimes I'll talk to people about the enemy. The pick a fight technique is one I often teach. Pick a fight technique. Who is the enemy in your industry? You don't need to name names. You can talk about practices. You can talk about outdated methodologies. You can talk about the status quo and how it's not as effective as your idea, etc. Who is the enemy? So I just teach little frameworks about the different stages in storytelling. Pick a fight. If you're writing content, why don't you pick a fight with something that's happening in your industry that you profoundly disagree with, and then you can create stories to illustrate your core point. So there's lots of different ways of doing it, but I just start with a story, and then that segues into a point or a lesson about the value of storytelling.
Yeah,
You're
that's such an
frozen on me.
important aspect. What's that?
You're frozen on me.
Uh-oh. Can you still hear me though?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, perfect. The video sometimes doesn't work that as well as we'd like with bandwidth, but the audio is.
Oh, you're back now. It's okay.
So,
you're back now. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never really figured out perfectly how to construct this tale. I've used it in one-on-one coaching and group coaching for years, but again, my business really didn't become sales coaching. So I'm curious how you'd modify this story. I'd be curious how you'd think to craft it differently. The way I like to think about selling is, let's pretend you sell tires, right? And you can picture you're at a Goodyear, or you're at a Costco, or you're at whatever. What's the big Australian tire shop? Like who would that be?
I haven't been there for 10 years. I'm in Vietnam at the moment, but
Oh, are you?
yeah. There's a company called Bow Repairs.
Perfect. So you're at the local whatever store, whatever tire shop you can visualize in your geography, and you work there. You sell tires all day long. The smell of rubber. You've got folks coming in and out all the time, usually frustrated with how much tires cost because, man, nobody really thinks about it that much, and you really only buy tires a handful of times in your life at that level. And sometimes these people are coming in a hurry. Sometimes they're agitated. Other times they got nothing else to do but eat popcorn and make a mess and cause a scene. But that's the environment you're in all day long. And you sell tires there. And when somebody walks in, they want to buy tires from you. That's why they are there. They want you to be the place where they can successfully buy the tires, because what they really don't want to do is drive to some other stupid tire shop and have to deal with this experience again. They want you to win.
Yeah.
And how well you win is a function of how deep you go down this road I'm about to explain. If you just try to sell the person a tire based on the tread or the model of the vehicle, the size, the fit, basically the feature level, how well it rolls, how long the warranty is, if you sell at that level, people will buy the tire. But not because you're a good salesperson, just because they really don't want to go to a second tire shop, and they probably need the damn tires and have to get out of there as fast as possible. So you'll sell some tires. But if instead you ask a few questions and start to understand what type of driving they do, maybe they've got a road trip coming up that they need to go on with their family. Now you can start to maybe tell a story to that individual that will allow you to sell at a higher level. Maybe what they're buying isn't a tire. Maybe what they're buying is safely getting to grandma's house for the holidays. That's a more expensive purchase. That has tremendous value in that individual's life. Actually making it to grandma's house safely because they have the appropriate snow tire to get over the pass in the winter. that's a different sale than the features that you might have had listed on the size or tread or warranty of the tire before. And you've just enhanced the value of what you sold to that person and potentially increased how much you sell it for. But even that doesn't take it all the way down the road. Because why is it so important to be at grandma's house? Well, it's the holidays. Are you selling them grandma waking up the kids for Christmas morning? Right? Are you a layer of emotion deeper in the experience that's created on the other side of that pass that they successfully drove through because of the tread of the tire you sold them? Oh boy, you're 3 layers deep now in this inception version of selling here. But even that doesn't really complete the picture, because sure, if the dad's buying the tire, he cares about grandma's feelings about it. But you know who he's most excited to make happy on this trip is his wife. Or vice versa, right? The wife wants to make the husband happy. It's not about man or woman there. It's just more that relation. So maybe there's an extra layer to this that, man, you know what really makes my wife the happiest is when her mom wakes the grandkids up and gets to experience Christmas morning with them. And now I'm selling you the fulfillment of your partner's emotional status in the form of some rubber in a round shape that goes at the bottom of your car. There's like 4 layers there we could construct. And you can take this to any infinite degree with just about any product and try to think multiple layers deep this. But the further you're able to go down that road by asking good questions, by connecting the dots with the individual of what they're really buying, the more you're able to elevate the value of what you've sold. And depending on the market you're in and the industry you serve and your product, be able to demand more of a premium for the value you just brought to that individual. That type of story is what I want salespeople to be really good at. And I'm curious, like, again, that story's not perfectly fleshed out. Frankly, I haven't told it in over a year because I don't do that every day. But like, as a professional storyteller, what modifications would you recommend I make in the way I construct that tale or think through the delivery of what selling really can be if you're a tire salesman or whatever widget you might move?
Look, just straight off the cuff there, off the top of my head, that would be a hard one to answer. But I do want to, I think what you're doing is a kind of almost a perfect encapsulation of what I said at the outset when I was knocking on the doors. Asking the right questions, probing, listening to the answers, asking more questions, pivoting to another stream of thought, etc., to get to the truth. That's what questioning is all about for me. I want to get to the truth. I want to get to the truth, and I cannot relax until I've found. Once again, we include the curiosity factor. Naturally curious, but I also want to get to the truth. I want to get to the truth. I want to find out what is really going on. We peel the layers, and then we get to the nub or the heart of the matter. Now we can talk about stories. So you did it very well. Linking the questioning, probing, curiosity, all of that, and then stories to give it more emotional resonance. So
I love that. Get to the truth. That is a hell of a central premise right there. How do you know when you're at the truth? How do you know you've arrived in the moment?
Their body, if it's we'd say, well, even on a Zoom call, even doing it virtually, because I don't do any offline work at all now. Everything is virtual, and so it's Zoom calls and occasional phone calls, things like that, and talking with people in the DMs and little voice messages and stuff like that. But if it's a proper sales call, the Zoom call, I can tell, and I think you would be able to tell. There's a change. I know when I've hit the spot. And they're doing this, and it's like even with content you can do it. I've had people say to me, "I read that post of yours about blah blah blah, whatever it was," and they're saying to me, "It felt like you were talking directly to me." Now, when a piece of content or a question that you ask or a conversation that you have invokes that sort of response, you're on the right pathway, and more often than not, a sale is going to flow from it, and it'll be a good sale too.
I liked your physical description of it, right? The audience might not be able to see it, but you kind of lean in. That's how I've always articulated it. Like what causes someone to lean into the table, right? The type of thing that you say it, they're like, yeah. No, say more. Don't say anything else about anything else. Talk about that more. That's where
Yeah,
you found the
they
truth.
they 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 do tend, even on a Zoom call, they do tend to lean in,
Yeah,
and if and you can see their response. Sometimes they're just nodding their head. They don't want to give away too much at that point, perhaps, but they're kind of doing this. They're nodding. You know, that it's resonating. It's really clicking
right.
for them. And you've probably, as the sales maker, because there's a difference between order taking and sales making, as you know. And I'm not an order
100%.
taker. I've never been an order taker. But you know, you know when there's been a shift. You just get a sense of it. But it's also the body language, as I said. And yeah, it's a marvelous thing. And we're doing noble work because we're helping them have better tomorrows, and that makes it all worthwhile. And then when you finish, you've made a sale, they're feeling great about it. I'm feeling good about it, not just because of the money, but because I've solved another problem and another potential transformation is on the way.
Absolutely. That's what ends up motivating me a tremendous amount is those moments where I truly have connected and helped that person have that better tomorrow. That's the service part of selling. Like I've dealt with a tremendous number of people who have a negative perception of selling. You just do that when you're in sales training. It's inevitable. You have to break that perception or help people move through it. And when people recognize really good salespeople are just really aggressive problem solvers. They're really
Yeah,
good at helping you realize you have a problem you didn't quite realize was as painful as it was. And they're not making it up. They can't make up the urgency or the pain, or they won't, or you won't buy, right? People are not stupid. But man, they're just really good at aggressively identifying problems for you and helping you through them.
yeah,
It's really a whole new
exactly. And
deal.
you use the word identifying, yes, and the correct effective identification can't happen unless they go through that probing sequence and in their quest to once again get to the truth. Sometimes the
Yeah.
problem that the prospect shares with us is not the heart of it. It's not the real problem. It's not the real issue. And your example with the tire selling tire
Yeah.
example illustrates that very well. We have to, we don't just, that's another thing that I've noticed with mediocre salespeople. They might, because they've been trained till they're blue in the face, they might ask questions because that's what they've been told to do. But they'll accept, often they'll just accept the first response that the prospect gives them. But the best salespeople, they know instinctively that that's just a response given to us to shut us up, right? So the best salespeople just won't accept, and this is where it takes perception, good perceptive abilities, analytical abilities, but also a ton of courage, because sometimes
Mm,
you're taking a risk by pushing further. You're taking a risk that they're going to push back and maybe even terminate the call or the appointment. Yeah. So it's critically important that we do this stuff, even though we're facing a risk, because if we don't, we're not getting to the truth and we're not satisfying our sacred obligation to do that. We have to get to the truth and we can't rest. And if we don't get to the truth, chances are we won't make a sale, or if we do, it'll just be some little itty bitty thing, just the minimum thing, just to shut us up and get rid of us. But if we want to, there's a lot more on the table than we originally envisage. So if we want to get to the truth, if we want to make a bigger sale, we want to satisfy people's problems in the best way possible. Can't We have to just keep probing and don't necessarily accept the first response that the prospect gives us because they don't fully trust us, do they, Eric? They don't fully trust us in the early stages. So they're going to give us some kind of an answer that has worked on 50 other, when they've delivered it to 50 other salespeople
right.
previously. But we've got to make sure it's not us. We're not going to be number 51. We're going to be the one. We're going to be the person who gets to the truth, gets to the nub of the matter, the heart of the matter, and that's when everything changes. Their body language changes, the tone of their voice, everything changes, and we know that only a short hop, step, and a jump, skip and a jump,
Right.
and we've got another deal done.
I couldn't agree more. And I love the way you said that sacred obligation, right? That commitment to have the courage to live through that moment and risk a lost deal for $1 to try to see if there's an opportunity for 5 or 50 or 100 or $5,000 out there. And it isn't even about the dollar value, it's just the value you can bring. And what it made me think of is, the most painful thing to live through as a salesperson, in my opinion, is a maybe. That's my most painful experience of all time in sales. My second most painful experience to live through in sales is a no, when I think I could have gotten a yes had I done my job better. Not had I been more convincing. That's not what I'm talking about at all. Had I done the beginning part of the job better, had I asked the other question, had I called out the opportunity I saw that was so much bigger, but I was scared to explore it. I hate maybes, but man, I hate the ones that I think I could have won if I'd have had the courage to be disciplined and do the thing I knew I needed to do. And it made me think back when I was first training salespeople back at College Pro. This is the house painting company. Someone used the terminology. They said there's the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. Pick one. And I was like, man, that's a heck of a way to say it. Like, I hate regretting how poorly I did in an experience. So let's just choose discipline as often as possible in those moments and have that courage. So how do you train salespeople to have that, to identify that moment? How do you teach them to, because you got to recognize it in it and then intentionally lean in. How do you help people get better at identifying that critical moment when they need to be courageous and disciplined instead of, accepting the maybe or accepting the $1 sale when there's probably a bigger opportunity for them?
Well, first of all, if it's a salesperson who's having problems, let's say in the traditional offline world, traditional sales teams, a world that I haven't been involved with for quite a long time, because now I'm purely virtual. So, but it's not that much different to now in many ways. But if I've got somebody who, for instance, in the when was it, 2006, I made a crucial decision to pivot towards the online world, and I had a main street business that collapsed. My wife was dying, and she was my business partner, and just the whole thing fell apart. Lost 7 figures, etc. And so I thought, well, I need to create an income so we can pay our bills, etc. So I thought the online world seems quite attractive. So I didn't know anything about it, blah, blah, blah. Looked for some opportunities, found something. It was a high ticket offer. Okay, right up my alley because high ticket, I like high ticket. And I ended up, put 10 grand in or something like that. And this is in 2006, so I don't know what it would be today, maybe $25,000 or something like that. And got some basic training. And I found that I made sales. It took me about 3 weeks to get the hang of doing this new thing, generating leads online. It's something I've never done before.
That was pretty early too, right?
Yeah, it was. And it was an American company that I signed on with. They had a high ticket offer. It was in the financial arena, so it sort of reflected my background. It was good in that sense. And they had courses like money management courses, and then they had a big conference in some exotic location in the West Indies or whatever, the Caribbean or whatever. And I could sell those, and I could make a pretty good commission, which is but after I got the hang of phoning, because I had to phone the leads, so they'd fill out a form online, and then I'd call them, and I wasn't very good on the phone initially because I hadn't been doing that sort of thing for a long time. I was very rusty. Took me 3 weeks to get the hang of it, but finally, in the dying days of the first month, I made $9,200 in 2006 money. So whatever that is in today's money, at least 20 grand, and then I became a kind of a hero globally with this company. So they had thousands and thousands of affiliates all over the world, many of whom were struggling. So then they started to invite me onto, trainings, etc., to train the people how I handle the calls and all the rest of it, which I did. But then I started building a sales team. All right, so I just can't help myself. Like to work with work with good people, and that's when it really became apparent to them that they're at a much lower level than me, and they just couldn't. They found it very, very difficult to overcome objections, as you're saying, and stalls. Prospect wants to delay the decision and all the rest of it. So I thought, right, the only way I can fix this is to find out what's really going on. I mean, my new affiliate in my team they can tell me, but whether it's exactly what's going on, I'm not so sure. So my thinking went back to those early days with Pastor Stan when I was knocking on doors. He came out with me. It wasn't just me doing a debrief to him on the Friday afternoon. He said, I'll come out with you on the next Monday. I want to find out what's really going on. So what I started to do was to either do a three-way call with them, and we became that worked extremely well. But I didn't do all the talking. I did what Pastor Stan did. I said, look, I want you to talk. You introduced me as a friend who's helping me, etc. And then I let them do the talking because I want to find out what was really going on. Same thing, get to the truth. Other times I got them to record it. This is in the days when we had Skype. We didn't have Zoom, right? Old-fashioned technology, now gone, of course. But so we had Skype. So I said, look, I'm going to be really busy at that time. Why don't you record it? Here's some software you can record it, blah blah blah, and then that's basically how I did it in the online world. In the offline world, when I was working physically with teams, they had a bad appointment last night. They went out to see some people. All right, they come in, we talk about it, debrief, and then sometimes I'd go out with them in the real world and find out what's really going on.
And then that process, the whole point of what you were doing was to give them feedback, right? Like that's the mechanism by which salespeople get better. Anybody gets better.
Yeah, that's right. And it's you only need to hear them for the first 20 minutes, and you know more or less what's happening or what's not happening. So, but yeah, so it doesn't matter whether it's online, offline. The mechanics are basically the same. Need to find out what's going on so we can diagnose the problem. It's not about berating them or making them feel small or anything like that. It's just I want to find out how can I help you if I don't know what's really happening here. And often it came back to they weren't asking the questions, the same old thing. They weren't asking the right questions. They weren't listening intently to the answers. They weren't interpreting the answers. They weren't sensing that they're not giving me the real answers. I need to dig deeper, blah, blah, blah. All of those things. It's just that they were terrified. They didn't have any confidence.
That mechanism of feedback is what it takes to get better at anything. That's how salespeople learn. That's how you learn to shoot a free throw or hit a golf ball or write a book or whatever you've ever done in your life that you've gotten good at. You got good at it because you got feedback. And sometimes the market gives you feedback, right? Sometimes you lose enough games and you just self-reflect and figure it out. But the best way it happens is like it happened to you at 18, which is an expert gives you feedback that helps you catapult your degree of success forward. We just launched a second company. Most of what you've seen that I post about on LinkedIn is leadership related. It's the language of leadership. What do you say and how do you say it to be a more effective and compelling leader? And that's my primary business to date. But out of that, we just launched a second company called Luminary. And what we do is we build custom AI role play experiences so that you can get that type of experience without having to have the coach. We train the AI to be the difficult customer, or be the difficult employee, whatever, and then provide you with the training so you know what to do. And then you get to practice an infinite number of times without risk, and you get that same degree of feedback. And it's just, that will never not be true, that's how people get better at things.
Yeah, that's great. Are you talking about that on LinkedIn at all, or is you still just sticking with?
Just starting to. We're about to make the content direction push. We just literally last week landed on the logo and the website look, and all of the digital assets will come out that will allow us to make it more credible rather than just speaking about it. But a lot of what I've talked about on LinkedIn over the years has been, yes, these are the skills and conversations and tools, but you got to practice this stuff to get better at it, right? I've been preaching practice and feedback for years. We've just added a technology to it now and launched a second company to do it in more nuanced ways. But we're pretty excited about that. It just was cool to hear you say it.
Yeah, well, that's probably going to be a scalable initiative for you.
That's the idea. That's the whole reason I built it for leadership was it's more scalable than me doing group coaching or academy calls where people practice, right? And it's not even just me. It's, I sold a product to busy leaders and I said, hey, you're a busy leader. You're struggling with this. Come give me an hour of your time. And they'd be like, but the problem is I don't have any time. There was an incongruity in the delivery of the service that would get them out of the problem. And so that was the original story and idea behind it. And it's just morphed along the way. Um, I wanted to ask you we'll take one other direction about storytelling here. You grew up in Australia, is that correct?
Yeah, born and raised.
Okay. So from the States, we have this mythical perspective of Australia. It's really far away. Everybody has a really cool accent as far as we're concerned, and we know almost nothing about it. I had the good pleasure of going on a cruise through Croatia, my wife and I, with 30 Aussies, and
Ah,
never had more fun hanging out with people. There were two Kiwis, two Americans, and 30 Aussies on this boat. And we had a ball getting to know these people. And because I was hanging out with them on a boat, they're like pulling up maps and showing me where things are. And one of the amazing things to me about Australia is how freaking big it is. And we, again, in the States, don't necessarily have a concept that this thing is just as large as the US. It takes 5 hours or longer to fly across it, and that there's
mm.
very little in the middle of it. And I was wondering if you could take a second. You might need to think about this one for a second, which would be just fine. But I was wondering if you could tell me a story about Australia, something that we wouldn't know as North Americans looking in from the outside, but that's a compelling, interesting tale about Australia.
Gee, there's a lot of interesting tales. Well, I guess most people, including Americans, they wouldn't know that it was started as a convict settlement. Yeah.
Yep.
So you had, people that stole loaves of bread and things like that in England, in the UK, and the prisons were a bit full over there, and they thought, let's get rid of these horrible people. They stole some bread, in the 1800s or whatever it was, 1700s, and we'll ship them. We'll find another country. As it happens, there was a navigator, a very famous navigator called Cook, and he was navigating the southern hemisphere, and he was looking for new countries to, some would say, exploit, but just new countries, new opportunities for the motherland. And so we've come across this place that was eventually called Australia. He sailed. Actually, there's a very interesting story here. Just before he discovered Australia, a Frenchman was doing the same thing, and he was in a boat, as well. And he went. If we think of the main city in Australia is Sydney, right? There's about 6 million people in that city now, and instead of discovering through the Sydney Harbour, which is a magnificent harbour, one of the best in the world, which is what Cook did, he came in further south into a place called La Perouse, and there's a Frenchman. And he looked around and stopped the boat, the little rowboats to shore. They looked around, and there were a lot of black people with spears and all this. What the heck? There's nothing here. It wasn't pretty. It was ugly, right? So they get back in the boat and they write a thing, and so to report back to the people in France, to the leader, the king, or whoever it was in France, that there's nothing to see there. Forget that country. Don't go south, right? Meanwhile, Cook. Yeah, it was like a year or two apart. That's all. It was very close. Cook just happened to go into this wide open area there in the ocean, and he said, there was like headlands on both sides, and he said, why don't we just keep going through this waterway here and see what we find? So they just kept going and going and going, and they discovered this magnificent harbour, beautiful scenery, everything. And they said, wow, this is awesome. And so he wrote in his little diary, I think I've discovered another colony for the UK, for England. And that's how it started. And so the politicians or whoever was running the country at the time thought, right, we've got all these convicts, let's ship them out to Australia. That's exactly what happened. So they set up a penal colony in Sydney, and they tried to make peace with the Aboriginals, the indigenous people. There were some bad things that happened as well, but anyway, that's how it started. It started as a penal colony, so I'm not sure whether I'm a descendant of a prison warden or a convict.
Wow. I think we all know that top headline, right? Started as a penal colony, but the humanity of that is amazing, right? As you were saying that, I quickly just pulled up a Google Maps over here in Wikipedia. It's one thing to say, yeah, we're going to start a penal colony, but like Australia is insanely far away from the UK. And this is obviously pre-Panama Canal. So we're talking, you're going east or you're going west. You're going around the Horn, or you are going around the southern tip of South America, or you are making your way through Hudson Bay and up through that. That is a wildly long ways to go to sail some prisoners. And it turns out it wasn't just the prisoners. They just lost America, right? And so they were trying to recapture some land and looking for new places. But Sydney's not exactly an obvious place to end up coming from. I guess they would have had to have gone around South America then, huh?
Well, James Cook was an incredible man in many ways. He was also a very humane man, and he noticed that there were, Indigenous people there, and he made notes that these people need to be taken care of if we're going to do this thing. And he tested the soil. They disembarked. They tested the soil, and they think this could be very, very good farming soil. So he did quite a bit of research, and then they moved out, and they took the big boat out of Sydney Harbour, and then kept going north from there on their way home, and they saw other parts of Australia as well, going up to the Great Barrier Reef, and they were just gobsmacked that no one had discovered it other than Perouse, La Perouse, the Frenchman who went to the wrong part of Sydney. Right. Yeah, he said, "There's nothing to see here."
Wow, luck of the draw, man. He drew the right card.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for telling that.
I often say to people that if the French did colonize it, their economy, their legal system wouldn't be as good, because the British legal system was the best in the world, and probably in many ways still is. But the food would be better because it was French. It'd be French. But Australian food's pretty good now anyway. They've caught up big time.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, Kim, thank you so much for taking this time. Thanks for letting me dive deep with you into sales and development of people and curiosity and just all of those things. I really appreciate it. If anybody in the audience wants to connect with you, what's the right way for them to do that? How would you like people to discover you?
LinkedIn. It's easy enough. Most people that I talk to have got LinkedIn accounts, so they can just ping me, say hi, have a conversation, whatever. Shoot the breeze, I don't mind. I'm big on conversation. So, LinkedIn. Easy.
We'll make sure and post your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. You can find those there, folks. Kim, thanks so much for your time. Good chatting with you.
Thanks, Erik. That was fun. It was great. Really got me thinking.
Thanks for joining us this week. Don't forget to take a second and subscribe. Maybe even share this episode with somebody it made you think of, or someone you think would take some value from it. This show is all about uncovering the brilliance and humanity of high performers. And whether those performers have a massive following, or a podcast, or a book, or they're a business owner, or they're buried somewhere in a corporation, or maybe they're a nonprofit leader, or they don't necessarily have to have a title. I'm really fascinated by people who are passionate and who are doing interesting things. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or send me an email at hello@languageofleadership.io to make that connection. I'll see you next week.